God of War Ragnarok is still on the road to releasing on the 9th of November. The series has gone through a massive makeover over the years, stepping away from the basic hack and slash format to something more complex, going from Greek mythology into Norse and the new story of Kratos becoming a papa again. Because if you don't remember, he actually was a papa in the original trilogy, as he did have a daughter. It has been close to 5 years since the last game released. Weirdly enough, it still feels a little too soon. Welcome back to the Mumbling Gamer. On today's Mumble, we'll be looking at if we should be worried about the upcoming game God of War Ragnarok. Let's start with the biggest change in development, the change of the director. Not many directors are that well known. I would say some of the most well known directors are Hideo Kojima, Mizuhiro Sakurai, and maybe Todd Howard.
That excitement impressed you're still here.
But back in 2018, a new fighter entered the battlefield. After the massive success of God of War 2018, it became common knowledge that Cory Barlog was the director of the game, especially after this, making it very surprising that when Ragnarok got announced that someone called Eric Williams will be at the helm of the upcoming game. And with no offense to Eric, it's slightly worrying. It's possible that he could do great. He has worked on near all God of War games, I think even more than Cory Barlog. But with this one being completely different to many of the other games, this could be better than worse, as the experience in the other games might not help with the God of War Ragnarok, with the game being completely different, obviously not compared to the last game. What he did work on, what could work in his favour. But there are many games out there who have no idea who directed them, like the latest Spider-Man and Horizon Forbidden West. I don't even know who directed the other God of War games. I feel bad for Eric, so we are not going to focus on this one that much, and I do hope this game turns out well for Eric's sake.
I'm gonna murder you.
I understand. Just 1 second.
Now we have the short development time, only took around 4 years, maybe even less. It's unlikely that the game started development straight after the release of the last game in 2018. That wouldn't be much to worry about, but that game did take nearly 5 to 8 years to actually develop, making the development time slightly worrying. That development time was understandable, as God of War went from this to this. God of War Ragnarok does have the element of being able to use the assets what was made for the God of War in 2018. That will most likely heavily shorten the development time as it does in other games. It just feels a bit soon. Spider-Man Redemption 2 both released in 2018 as well. Maybe Red Dead Redemption is a bad example because Rockstar has seemingly given up on that IP. We won't get a sequel to that in years. And then we have Spider-Man 2 that is set to release in 2023 and for some reason feels like a lot better amount of time. And no, I don't count Miles Morales, it was a glorified DLC. The longer development time may be explained by the fact that Spider-Man 2 is an open world game, but God of War did have open world elements that most likely will be expanded on in this game. It just makes me worry that they kind of rush Ragnarok to get it out to be the big end game for PlayStation, as they don't have that much else on the schedule, especially with that exclusive stamp on God of War Ragnarok. It's one of them big selling games that doesn't just sell games, it also sells consoles for them winter months, and it also maybe has a little bit of a Christmas theme. Well, it is snowing. It's possible that the short development time could be shown through some glitches. Let's just hope these glitches don't ruin the experience if they come to be. It's also possible that the game released on 2 generations could hold God of War Ragnarok back. The PS5, the current generation, if you didn't know, has been around for more than 2 years now, and it's starting to feel like games should now starting to become more exclusive to that console. If we're getting remakes from previous generations come to PS5, we definitely should be getting more exclusive games on that console as well. A couple of games that show how exclusive release on the current generation is better would be Demon's Souls and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, with both PS5 exclusive. Due to that, both of them had higher graphical standards, and also with the Rift Apart, they used what seemed to be an element of the game that might not have worked as well on PS4. It's possible that the release on PS4 and PS5 has held the game back. Something like the fast travelling God of War 2018 was a slight problem, with it being pretty slow on the PS4. It's likely that still may happen for the PS4 players out there, but it's possible that if the game is released just on PlayStation 5, the way they curated the system in place might have been completely different, as the game has been made with both generations in mind, therefore possibly holding it back and changing how the game was developed throughout its lifespan. However, this is all hypothetical, as we currently don't have any clue if the game would have changed if it was going to be released on only one generation and not two. We have seen some gameplay, but not that much at the time of writing. When looking at other games like Saints Row Reboot, a game where we didn't see much gameplay on the road to release, that ended up being a below par game. Then there's games like Gotham Knights that we've already seen close to over 30 minutes of gameplay before release, with one of the first being released nearly 6 months before the release date, and it was nearly 15 minutes of gameplay. With God of War Ragnarok, we have seen a minuscule amount in comparison. Altogether, I think we have seen about 2 minutes of gameplay, and around 75% of that was exploring and not actual combat. The combat we have seen is decent, with some added elements that involve using the chain blades and the Leviathan axe for the puzzles. But the new big mechanic added to God of War Ragnarok is the hookshot. If Doomguy and Master Chief gets a hookshot, it's no surprise that the OG hooker like Kratos also gets one in Ragnarok. In all seriousness though, when thinking about God of War Ragnarok's gameplay, I'm not really that worried about it, as I expect it to be really similar to the God of War 2018, but it's definitely worrying that we haven't seen much of it, and it feels like we should have seen at least maybe 5 to 10 minutes of strong gameplay. By this time when the last God of War was released, we'd already seen over 10 minutes. It changed a bit by the time of the release, but it still showed us what we will expect from the game. Currently, we really don't have much to go off, and we all know the unknown is worrying, especially in gaming. Then we get to the biggest worry, as it's full to the brim with mystery. This obviously being the story. It's already been confirmed that the two God of Wars will meet, Kratos and Tyr. The anticipated fight of Thor and Kratos will happen, but the big worry is, will Kratos survive this game? Feels like even though it's worrying that we haven't saw much gameplay of God of War, it's near impossible to get wrong with it already having the foundations from the last game. But it's possible to have the best gameplay ever, but if the story is a poopy, the game could be pretty bad. And if we want an example of this, just look at The Last of Us Part 2. Gameplay of that might be unmatched, but it's slightly bulked down by the controversial story. It's possible that God of War could end up like this. The obvious scary elephant in the corner that no one wants to talk about is Kratos' death, what was teased at the end of the last game, and with the prophecy of God's children killing their parents as Kratos did, and with the son of Kratos being Loki, and he usually isn't the nicest god of them all. If we go into mythology and not the Marvel character, the only god Loki is known to kill is Balder, like in the previous game. Not really making Loki a villain in the traditional sense, but making him more of a villain to the Norse gods. Am I already trying to talk myself out of thinking about Kratos dying at the end of the game? Yes, I am. I do think after everything, the story will be the biggest worry throughout the whole game. It's very likely that they won't mess up the experience of playing the game apart from the story, due to the fact how good gameplay wise God of War 2018 was. And if they somehow mess that up, it would be very surprising, as they could easily put them elements into this game with a completely different story, and it could still work pretty well. It's very surprising if they didn't bring out a game on the same level as the previous one, as they do have a lot to live up to. We do have a new director at helm, but with him possibly working on more God of Wars than Balrog, it's very likely that the game is in great and maybe even better hands in the future. The story is the one thing that truly does worry me, the biggest worry being what will happen if Kratos dies. I'm not ready for the Atreus to be the main character of the whole series. I'm not ready for Atreus to take the main role in the future. Can you imagine it in 3 to 4 years that we see Atreus on the front cover with no Kratos? I just don't want to see Kratos die. They could, however, pull a Gears 5 with Kratos being like Marcus Phoenix and being a mentor to Atreus, rather than the protagonist and him being a mentor to his son, and you not being able to play as his son. You just play as his son, and Kratos would be there, but not the main character. Actually, that would be weird. Would that be worse? That could be worse, actually. Maybe he's just, his head's chopped off and he replaces Mimir, or you got 2 heads on the back and the Mimir and Kratos are talking to you. This was a weird worrying about, due to the fact it's not that worrying when waiting for this upcoming release, and it's the first one we've done when we're not completely worried about the outcome. Maybe this should have been called Why Shouldn't We Worry About It, but I think the better title is Should We Be Worried About God of War Ragnarok. But looking through what we know and what we have seen, there is some worry, but not that much, mostly being the story in my eyes. I wouldn't say there's a lot of red flags for this game like there has been with some previous games we have covered, maybe some amber flags, but that's pretty much it. That's it for this mumble. Are you worried about God of War Ragnarok? Comment below your thoughts, stay tuned for the mumbling moments, and I will see you on the next mumble.
I'm gonna sleep through winter.